Police Scarlight. You won't believe what just happened in Congress. Jasmine Crockett was left speechless, flushed face. Adam Schiff completely lost it, pouting face. And Senator John Kennedy pulled no punches collision. This showdown is unlike anything you've seen on Capitol Hill. And it all happened on camera television. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The hearing chamber was calm, at least on the surface. It was one of those mornings where everything seemed ordinary. Polished shoes, expensive suits, and stacks of documents rustling as aides whispered quietly behind high-backed chairs. The air was thick, not with tension yet, but with the weight of routine. Cameras clicked softly as they focused on the panel of lawmakers, and for a while, it felt like just another day in the halls of American politics. Jasmine Crockett, seated near the center, exuded the quiet authority she's become known for. Clad in a crisp, tailored outfit and perfectly composed, she reviewed her notes, eyes scanning each page with a calm confidence. Crockett, always ready with sharp insight or a cutting remark when necessary, had seen her fair share of heated debates. But today, something felt different. Across the room sat Congressman Adam Schiff, a familiar face in high-profile investigations. In committee hearings, Schiff was silent, eyes forward, posture controlled, the look of a man bracing for impact or preparing for battle. He had that slight frown he often wore when deep in thought, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk as if counting down to something only he knew was coming. And then, like the first rumble of thunder before a storm, Senator John Kennedy stepped up to the microphone. At a first glance, Kennedy seemed relaxed. His southern drawl, often mistaken for casual charm, masked a sharp legal mind and an unmatched flair for political theater. He had the manner of someone who knew exactly what he was about to do and who it was going to hit hardest. His expression was unreadable, a half smile, half scowl, like he was amused and annoyed at the same time. But behind that gaze was unmistakable resolve. He wasn't there to ask polite questions. He wasn't interested in party pleasantries or procedural niceties. He was there for a confrontation. As Kennedy adjusted the microphone, the room seemed to shift. Jasmine Crockett glanced up, sensing the change. Even Schiff, stoic until now, straightened his back and locked eyes with his challenger. The other lawmakers looked on with cautious curiosity, some leaning forward, others stiffening, like soldiers sensing incoming fire. And then, Kennedy began to in a low, measured tone. He started by acknowledging the hearing's official purpose, something about oversight, integrity, the usual. But it was clear from the cadence of his words and the weight behind them that he had no intention of sticking to the script. His voice grew sharper, more pointed. His charm faded, sentence by sentence, replaced by something colder. He wasn't making a speech. He was drawing a line in the sand. He turned his full attention to Schiff. "You know, Mr. Schiff," Kennedy said, voice steady but unmistakably cutting. "There's something that's been bothering me for a long time. And I think it's about time we said it out loud." The silence that followed was deafening. It was in that moment, that breath between the accusation and the explosion, when everyone realized this wasn't going to be a normal hearing. This was personal. Kennedy's gaze didn't waver. His words had a precision to them, as if they'd been rehearsed 100 times but saved for just the right moment. There was no sarcasm this time, no southern wit or metaphors, just a cold, direct call out. It wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. But it was electric. Jasmine Crockett, watching from her seat, blinked, almost as if startled. She shifted slightly in her chair, sensing what was coming. She'd witnessed plenty of debates, some passionate, some performative, but this was different. It was raw, tense, and oddly quiet for how intense it felt. The other members of the chamber sat frozen. A few pens stopped scribbling. Staffers leaned in. Even the press photographers, trained to anticipate peaks of action, held their breath. This was the moment the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Right before the storm hit, Kennedy had pulled the pin. Now everyone waited to see if Schiff would throw it back or let it explode. And he did. But that's a story for the next chapter. "Mr. Schiff," Senator John Kennedy began, his voice steady, low, and deliberate. "You've misled the American people too many times. And I'm here to call it out. Today." Collision boom. It wasn't just a bold statement. It was a political cannonball, fired straight across the aisle and broadcast live to millions. The chamber froze. Not a sound from the gallery. No rustling papers. No coughs. Just a stunned silence that blanketed the room as the weight of Kennedy's words settled like dust after an explosion. Even the cameras seemed to pause in mid-pan, almost zooming in instinctively on Schiff's suddenly frozen face. That IT wasn't a question. It wasn't an opinion. It was a direct accusation, clear, forceful, and meant to sting. And Senator Kennedy wasn't bluffing. He leaned in slightly, eyes locked on Schiff, not with anger, but with the unflinching focus of someone who had waited for this moment for a long time. This wasn't just politics. This was personal. This was a reckoning. Kennedy didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word hit like a hammer. "You've stood before this Congress," he continued, time and time again, spinning stories, leaving out key facts, manipulating narratives that have divided this country and dragged it through the mud of partisan warfare. He paused briefly, letting the silence speak, especially, he said, on matters of national security and intelligence, matters where trust is everything. The tension was now unbearable. Jasmine Crockett, still seated at the center, shifted in her chair. Her eyes darted between the two men, eyebrows slightly raised. It wasn't just the content of Kennedy's claims, it was the conviction behind them. Schiff sat still, but the redness rising in his cheeks betrayed the storm brewing beneath the surface. Kennedy pressed on. "For years," he said, "you've presented theories without evidence, read narratives into transcripts that weren't there, and stood before cameras feeding the American people something closer to political fan fiction than actual fact." Fire Schiff tried to interject, his hand raised slightly, his mouth twitching in emotion, but Kennedy cut him off with surgical precision. "I'm not finished," Kennedy snapped. "You'll have your turn, but the people deserve mine first." That moment sent a shockwave through the room. Even Schiff, known for his poker face and careful rhetoric, seemed taken aback. He shifted in his seat, visibly clenching his jaw. The committee chair leaned forward, looking uncertain about whether to intervene. And then Kennedy dropped the line that would soon echo across headlines and social media feeds. "You can't rewrite the truth just because it doesn't fit your narrative," he said, voice low but burning with intensity. "And the American people deserve honesty, not theater." Microphone mic drop. The phrase hit like a freight train. The kind of line that instantly becomes a political catchphrase. Journalists scribbled it down. Commentators mouthed it from behind glass windows. Twitter, no, X, was already drafting the hashtags. Kennedy paused, letting the echo of his own words hang in the air. "This isn't a game show," he added. "This is the United States Congress. And your credibility, Mr. Schiff, is not just in question, it's in pieces." By this point, Schiff was visibly rattled. He opened his mouth to respond, but Kennedy wasn't quite done. "This chamber," Kennedy said, gesturing broadly with his hand, "was once a place where facts mattered more than headlines, where service mattered more than self-promotion. That's the Congress I still believe in, and that's why I'm not going to sit quietly while you turn it into a stage play." The room, by now, felt like a pressure cooker. The tension was so thick, it seemed you could slice it with a gavel. Staffers exchanged wide-eyed glances. Crockett leaned slightly forward, clearly engrossed in every syllable. For viewers watching at home, it was one of those rare moments in politics where everything else stops. No scrolling, no distractions, just an unfiltered, unexpected collision of power, ego, and truth. Or at least two competing versions of IT. It wasn't often that a sitting senator challenged a longtime congressman so directly, so publicly, and so unapologetically. And yet, Kennedy had done exactly that. The hearing was no longer about policy. It had become something bigger, a confrontation that reflected the wider frustration boiling in American politics. Truth, trust, accountability, and John Kennedy? He had just turned those words into weapons. That's when Adam Schiff lost it. And, not in a subtle way, the transformation was instant and unmistakable. One moment, he was seated, lips tightly pressed together, barely holding in the tension. The next, he was on his feet, face flushed, voice rising. "You sit there pretending to stand for truth," he shot back, jabbing a finger across the table at Senator Kennedy. "But all you do is grandstand." Loudspeaker boom. Just like that, the Hearing officially went off the rails. The calm, composed Schiff, known for his legalese and surgical style of questioning, was gone. In his place stood a man who had reached his breaking point, live on national television. The air in the room snapped. Members of the committee glanced at one another. Some tried to intervene. Others leaned back, realizing this was no longer a standard hearing. It was a full-blown political brawl. "You want to talk about facts?" Schiff shouted, his voice cracking with intensity. "Let's talk about the facts you keep ignoring. Let's talk about your record, about your spin." He wasn't just reacting. He was erupting. Gone was the carefully worded caution he normally operated with. This was raw emotion, anger, frustration, and the pent-up pressure of years of political warfare all boiling over in real time. Kennedy raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. He knew he'd struck a nerve, and Schiff's meltdown was confirming it for the whole country to see. "You accuse me of theater?" Schiff continued, shaking his head in disbelief. "This whole performance of yours, this righteous indignation, this is the act." He slammed his palm on the table. Not once, twice. The room jolted with each thud. Even the C-SPAN cameras, typically impartial observers, seemed to close in tighter. Viewers at home could almost feel the heat rising through their screens. Social media was already exploding. Tweets, live reactions, memes, all of it was happening in real time. Megaphone Schiff didn't stop there. He held up a thick binder of notes, pages flagged, scribbled on, full of citations and transcripts, and then, with visible frustration, threw it down onto the desk. "You've turned this hearing into a circus," he shouted. "And you've done it, not for truth, not for justice, but for clicks, for headlines." The binder thudded loudly against the wood, echoing across the chamber. The sound alone was enough to make several people flinch. His aides looked stunned. Crockett watched silently, lips pursed, clearly gauging whether to step in or stay out. Others in the room just stared, wide-eyed, unsure whether they were watching a breakdown or a battle strategy. But Schiff wasn't finished. "I've spent my career defending the Constitution," he said, voice still sharp but now laced with visible emotion. "I've taken heat. I've taken threats. But I've never backed down from standing up for what's right." There was a noticeable quiver in his voice now, not weakness, but rawness. A rare, unscripted moment of vulnerability breaking through his usual calculated exterior. "You come in here with your sound bites and your gotcha lines," he snapped, pointing again at Kennedy. "But the American people aren't props in your game. They deserve better." The tension in the room hit a peak. Nobody dared speak that it wasn't just a clash of ideologies. It was a clash of egos, reputations, and identities. Kennedy, cool and composed, had delivered a body blow. Schiff, fiery and unfiltered, had just thrown a counterpunch fueled by years of political pressure and national scrutiny. The gavel finally slammed down from the committee chair. "Order," someone barked. "Order in the chamber." But there was no putting the genie back in the bottle. This moment, this outburst, had already burned itself into the public consciousness. It would be replayed, reanalyzed, and remixed by morning news shows, YouTubers, and political commentators for days. Schiff slowly sat back down, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his brow. Kennedy, calm and unmoved, simply leaned back, arms folded, letting the silence speak for itself. The damage had been done, and regardless of which side of the aisle you were on, one thing was clear: this wasn't politics as usual. This was war in suits and ties, broadcast live. Amidst the verbal fireworks, desk slams, and rising tempers, there was one figure in the room who wasn't speaking, but who was saying everything without saying a word. Representative Jasmine Crockett. As Senator Kennedy delivered his brutal takedown and Congressman Schiff fired back with unfiltered emotion. All eyes weren't just on the two men shouting. More and more, the cameras began cutting to Crockett, seated at the center of it all, bearing witness to what was quickly becoming the most explosive moment of the hearing. And her reaction? It spoke volumes. She leaned back slightly in her leather chair, eyes wide, her usual poker face giving way to a rare glimpse of disbelief. Crockett, known for her no-nonsense approach, razor-sharp questioning, and fearless energy during high-profile exchanges, looked stunned. This wasn't the type of drama you trained for. This was something else that A.S. Kennedy jabbed accusations, and Schiff threw rhetorical grenades. Crockett sat still, shoulders back, hands clasped, but her eyes moved fast. They darted from Kennedy to Schiff, then briefly toward the committee chair, as if checking to see if anyone else was going to call a timeout. No one did. The first time the camera cut to her, she blinked, slowly. Her lips pressed into a faint frown, not angry, but incredulous. The second time, she gently shook her head, almost imperceptibly, like she couldn't believe what she was witnessing at one point. As Schiff's voice cracked with emotion and he slammed his binder on the table, the microphone picked up Crockett, whispering something to a colleague next to her. The words weren't entirely audible, but the look on her face said it all. This is wild. And then came the moment that social media couldn't get enough of. A soft laugh, brief but real. Not mocking, not cruel, just a short, stunned chuckle of disbelief, as if to say, this can't be real life right now. That single clip, captured by the C-SPAN cameras and rebroadcast across cable news and social platforms, instantly went viral. It was turned into reaction GIFs, memes, and TikToks within hours. One tweet simply read, Jasmine Crockett is all of us watching this chaos unfold. Over 500,000 likes. But behind the viral reaction was something more important, poise. Because while the men at the center of the storm were raising their voices and pointing fingers, Crockett did what leaders are trained to do. She absorbed, observed, and stayed composed. Later that day, when cornered by reporters in the hallway, she was asked what it felt like to sit between two political lightning rods during one of the most intense public clashes in recent congressional history. Her answer was as grounded as it was powerful. The intensity in that room was like nothing I've experienced before, she said. Both of them came in ready for war. It stopped being about policy real fast. She didn't assign blame. She didn't pick a side. But what she did do was underline something important. How political theater can sometimes overshadow political purpose. And that's why so many viewers connected with her reaction. Not just because it was relatable, but because it was real. No rehearsed statement. No grandstanding. Just a moment of human honesty in a room full of scripted rage. As the hearing wrapped up and the media frenzy ignited outside, Crockett quietly gathered her notes and exited without drama. Her restraint became the contrast that made her stand out even more. Some analysts praised her on morning news panels. One commentator said, in a room full of people trying to steal the spotlight, Crockett earned it by doing nothing but being real. Others noted how her reaction captured a broader sentiment in the country. Exhaustion with performative politics and craving for cooler heads. And make no mistake, Jasmine Crockett was trending, but not for shouting, not for slamming binders, not for calling anyone out. She went viral for something far rarer in Washington these days. Genuine reaction, grace under pressure, and the look of a leader watching chaos and choosing calm. Why this moment broke the internet? Mobile phone with arrow fire. So why did this moment break the internet? Because it wasn't politics as usual. It wasn't staged. It wasn't filtered through layers of PR teams, media training, or spin doctors. It was real, raw, emotionally charged. Two political titans clashing in full view of the American public. And in the center of it all, a reaction that made millions of people stop scrolling. It was the kind of authenticity we rarely see anymore, especially in Washington. In a world where most hearings fade into obscurity and sound like a string of buzzwords and talking points, this exchange stood out because it wasn't rehearsed. It couldn't have been. No one could fake the way Adam Schiff's voice cracked, the slam of his binder on the desk, the cold composure of John Kennedy's stare, or the sheer disbelief on Jasmine Crockett's face. Movie camera, the moment felt cinematic. It had everything. Drama, tension, conflict, a silent observer turned star, and enough unpredictability to rival an episode of House of Cards. Within hours, millions of people had seen the clip. On Twitter, now X, the hashtags began to stack up. Hashtag Schiff meltdown, hashtag Kennedy versus Schiff, hashtag Jasmine Crockett, hashtag Congress clash, each one trending globally. TikTok creators reenacted the confrontation with dramatic music and captions. Some turned Schiff's explosive lines into audio trends. Others stitched Crockett's reaction into montages of when the group chat goes off or Me watching my coworkers fight at 9 a.m. The internet was on fire. Instagram stories lit up with reactions from political commentators and influencers alike. Even apolitical creators, comedians, lifestyle bloggers, and meme pages couldn't resist posting clips of the chaos that on YouTube, commentary channels posted breakdowns titled, "Did Adam Schiff just lose it on national TV? Kennedy versus Schiff. Who really won?" Jasmine Crockett's face says it all. These videos racked up hundreds of thousands of views in hours. Some even hit the trending page globally. But it wasn't just the volume of content. It was the engagement. People were invested, debating, laughing, analyzing, sharing their own reactions, and creating a digital echo chamber that kept amplifying the moment far beyond Capitol Hill. And perhaps the biggest twist? Jasmine Crockett. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't interrupt. She didn't take a side. Yet her expressions alone made her the breakout star of the moment. A raised eyebrow here. A slow shake of the head there. That half-second chuckle. That said more than a full speech could. Her reaction was the audience's reaction. The millions watching from their couches or phones felt seen. They weren't just spectators. They were Jasmine in that moment. Shocked, amused, maybe a little horrified, but fully glued to the screen. In speech bubble, she was trending not for being loud, but for being real. And in today's digital culture, real wins. Especially when it cuts through the noise of spin, slogans, and overproduced sound bites. Political experts chimed in quickly. Several media analysts noted how this kind of exchange, unscripted and emotionally unfiltered, reflects a shift in what audiences crave from political content. No longer is it enough to deliver bullet points and read from statements. People want truth moments, even if they're messy. Especially if they're messy. Cable news shows replayed the footage. Over and over. Panels argued about who crossed the line, who came out ahead, and what it all meant for the future of congressional decorum. But outside the Beltway, people weren't discussing policy implications. They were sharing gifs of Crockett raising her eyebrows and Schiff slamming his papers. Fire, and just like that, a moment intended to be another hearing became a viral event. IT reminded the public that even the most powerful political arenas can combust into raw human emotion, unfiltered, unpredictable, and oddly entertaining. Was it chaotic? Yes. Was it uncomfortable? Maybe. But was it unforgettable? Absolutely. This wasn't about winning or losing a debate. It was about being real enough to stop the scroll, light up the group chats, and spark millions of reactions in every corner of the internet. And that's why this moment broke the internet.so. What happens next? Will Schiff and Kennedy face consequences for their on-air blow-up? Will Crockett speak more about what she witnessed? And what does this moment say about the future of our political climate? One thing's for sure, the line between politics and reality TV just got thinner, and the American people are watching more closely than ever. Backhand index pointing right, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Whose side are you on, Kennedy or Schiff? And did Jasmine Crockett's reaction say it all?